Hey everyone! Before we dive in, we want to give a big shout out to TACA, the Arts Community Alliance, and Moody Fund for the Arts. This season of Dance Behind the Screen podcast is powered in part by their support. Because of them, you're getting free episodes wherever you listen, full video interviews on YouTube, and our amazing guests receive an artist stipend. If you love what we do and want to support the work, head over to knowvoxdance.com. All right, let's get into it.
No Box Dance presents Dance Behind the Screen, process production, and social media. Don't forget, say no to the box. Dile no a la caja. 고정관념 이란 상자에서 벗어나세요.
Welcome to Dance Behind the Screen podcast, where dance technology and creativity converge. I'm your host, Martheya, and today's episode is titled Leadership and Innovation in the Arts with Anne Kogan. Anne is a creative arts administrator whose work focuses on community engagement, cultural equity, and innovative arts programming. She has served at the City of Dallas's Office of Arts and Culture, was the programming manager at the AT&T Performing Arts Center, where she produced the Elevator Project, which is where we first connected. And currently, Anne is the programs manager at TACA, the Arts Community Alliance. We have worked closely with Anne over the last 9 months as part of the TACA Arts Accelerator program. Let's dive into a conversation about leadership, creativity, and reimagining the future of the arts. Anne, welcome to our show.
Hello, it's good to be here. Thanks for asking me to come on.
Let's dive right in. How do you approach evaluating the success of community-driven or participatory arts programming?
It's right at the heart of the things I really love too. So I think with any sort of evaluation, with any sort of project, you always start with what goals were set and you work towards, okay, can I actually show anything towards what I thought I was going to achieve? And then there's all of the other things that you learn in the process of evaluation. Because you can evaluate something, but without having put out an original kind of thesis or a theory of change, you're not really evaluating towards anything. And so when we look at community programs in particular, I am always really hyper-focused on impact, which starts with what do we actually think we can accomplish? And Martheya, I know you saw this in our conversations during the accelerator about impact. I think of it as the difference between what would have happened without your involvement or without your intervention and what happens because you did the work that you're doing, right? And so when you combine the idea of what is the actual change that you're trying to accomplish, write it down with those evaluations where you can say, okay, did these things actually occur? Did we make progress? Did we not make progress? Which is just as important because that helps you learn and refine for the next time. And then you get to start putting together a really good picture of what actually happened and the change that you affected. What's really important also with community engagement, community programming is that you always have to go in with the mindset that you don't necessarily know what's best, right? Like you really have to start from a place of inquiry, start from a place of just conversations, relationship building, because those are the things that lead you to actually identify what the right combination of activities or people or whatever it is that you want to work with will be. This is something that I know I've said many times to myself, but has really had to be a learned practice. Not just, oh yeah, we always start by asking people what they want because it's not as simple as asking what they want, right? It's what do you want combined with what can I do combined with what do 17 other people think they want? And what does my funder want? And what does my boss want? And what do all of these other people want to accomplish? It's really about bringing together all of that information, bringing people together or bringing people along with you and getting buy-in and getting support and excitement as you progress through an activity or through a project. And then again, thinking about what you're trying to achieve and creating your evaluations towards if those things actually happened or if those things were present.
I love that answer. And I think something that we learned the hard way at No Box is we have our festival in 3 different countries. We have it here in Dallas, Texas, USA. We have it in Mexico and we have it in Korea. At the beginning, we almost tried to just kind of copy and paste our programming. But what we've really learned is we have to start with the community because what they want to see here in Dallas and the kind of experiences people are wanting and our community is wanting is completely different than in Seoul or in Mexico City, for instance. And so that's been an exciting challenge that we've been navigating. And we're having a lot of conversations about community-driven impact and participatory arts programming, and really starting, like you said, with that inquiry with the people, who's the community you're actually serving. So there's like all these wants that you talked about from the grantor, like they need this specific data out of your program. How do you suggest one balances all of these wants while remaining true to that like ideal and the mission of the organization? This is Dance Behind the Screen, where technology, strategy, and creativity collide.
Yeah, I think that the last part of your question is the key, right? It is easier to bring people together around a common idea when you can really articulate what that idea is and make sure that everyone shares it at the root of what we're trying to accomplish. It helps you answer a lot of questions, and it helps people have the ability to answer their own questions when you say, okay, does this thing that I'm thinking about really line up with this mission? Whether it's the project or the organization, whatever that is. Compromise, right? Everyone has to be willing to have some level of compromise because nobody is going to successfully get every one of their wants. And hopefully you get all of your needs, but you're not ever going to get all of your wants, right? So even being able to say, I absolutely need these things, these are non-negotiable, these are things I would like to have, these are things I don't really actually care how they come out. So if somebody else has a high priority there, great, we have a decision made. But being able to see the outcomes as somewhat flexible, because going in that there's going to be some level of compromise, but also like with any negotiation practice, right? This is a negotiation practice. So you want to make sure that everyone understands that we're all working towards a win-win outcome, right? Everybody's going to get some level of wins out of it. The other thing is, this is one of my biggest challenges, I think all the time I struggle with. I think I've said it like 20 times in the last week, but when the perfect is the enemy of the good, right? If you wait to do something until it's all exactly right, you might never actually do it. Those are some things that if you can set up conversations like that early on with everybody involved, make sure that everyone knows that we're all going to be in it for the mutual benefit of everyone involved. Anytime you can say things like that at the outset, you set the stage for how people come into a space or a collaboration. You end up with a better outcome, I think.
I think that's really helpful. What are your tips, or how do you approach tangible goal setting so that every partner can have that win-win and understand that mutual benefit? And I ask that because I find that when you have the goal written down on paper, we're all like, okay, we're reading this, we're working towards this goal, we know what we're trying to do. Could you walk us through the steps to setting really clear and tangible goals?
Yeah, there's a couple of different tools that people use. Unsurprisingly, I'm sure to you, I've become a massive fan of logic models where you can really identify your long-term goals and your short-term goals, and then walk backwards from there in terms of how you achieve those actual goals. It's interesting to see a mix of strategic and tactical goals come together as well. You have to identify, okay, is this going to be an impact, or is this something that we just need to accomplish these 14 small tasks? But also asking yourself, if you zoom out from those 14 small tasks, what do they actually accomplish as a whole in aggregate? Because those are situations where the end is more than the sum of its parts, or whatever the actual phrase for that is. But the impact of those 14 tasks altogether is significantly more than the tasks because they all feed up into a goal. I like starting big and then getting really into the nitty gritty of what does that mean. Another tool that can be really helpful, and this is like such a simple, I think this actually comes from Agile project management. It's so simple, but when you're bringing a group of people together, you can have them write down their goals individually or their desires individually without talking to each other, without sharing anything. And then you all have to share at the same time. In project management, you use a Post-it, write one thing, you flip your Post-it over all at the same time. But this helps you come in, it helps every individual person come in with clarity about their own goals, their own desires and needs before you really get into how we balance all of the individual pieces. So then, like you said, just the fact that it's written down, you can come back to that and say, oh, yeah, does this still achieve the thing that I needed to get at the outset? Or have I been like going along with the conversation? Because we all know that as like, we're all human, right? Like we can get into those conversations and you can say, I'm really happy that my mind changed. Or you can say, oh, I didn't even think about it. I was having such a good time in this conversation that like, I didn't even realize like I had gotten so far from what I knew I needed. Honestly, like writing it down, writing more down than you think you need to write down, and not being afraid to write down like the things that seem obvious, because it may be obvious to you because it's been living in your head for a while, and it may be totally shocking to someone else, whether that is a goal or a process or a task.
I think that's super helpful. Are there any other methods or practices that have really improved?
Honestly, the biggest thing for me lately has been logic models. And this is where you really whittle everything down to a single statement sometimes that is the change that you are making, that difference between what would have happened without you and what happened because you were there. And this is something that is like my next rabbit hole to get into, honestly. Like I've read a little bit about theory of change, but it is a framework that I think can really help when you're at the outset of a project, when you're thinking about evaluation for a project. And I've seen people use this really effectively with large scale projects that they did the research throughout and they did the evaluation throughout, and then whittled all of that down into a single statement around the impact of the work that was done all over the country. That they could say, identify one really powerful and factual, because it was backed up by research and evidence, change that they accomplished.
I think that's so exciting and so applicable in so many different ways as an artist, whether it be for the impact of your choreography, your work, or the programs from your organization. I want to zoom out a little bit, Anne. So you've had a lot of different interactions with organizations at many different scales, many different backgrounds, all around the field of arts. And so I'd love to talk about, in your experience, what are the key elements of a resilient and future-facing arts organization that is also connected to its community? Are there some common attributes that you could identify for us?
It is really exciting to look at all of these different organizations and see patterns, right? One of the benefits of being a funder, being in the position I'm in with Taka, is that I get to see patterns because I'm reading 60, 70 applications at once, right? It's helped me make connections. All of our work in the Arts Accelerator has helped me make connections to jobs that I've had before and organizations that I've worked with before too. So I actually, I come back really frequently to Data Art's piece that they released, I think in 2018 at this point, but the alchemy of high performing arts organizations. This Actually, some of what you put into your question is really central in this piece, this research report, right? That the alchemy of high performing arts organizations is the combination of really great artistic quality, really strong relationships with the community, and super strong organizational management. That's really like the interplay. And you can see that also even in Michael Kaiser's The Cycle, right? Like in the flywheel effect, where these components feed each other. So you start to see the relationships between them strengthening each other. You can't have great fundraising if you don't have great work. And you can't have great work if you don't have great fundraising. And you also can't have great fundraising if you don't have a solid organization, because a lot of people are hesitant when an organization looks shaky. It makes people a little cautious, right, about getting involved. So I think that the strongest organizations, most resilient organizations, they do great work. Number one, whatever that work is, the output is really high quality and impactful and connected to the audiences, the community members, the people that are on the receiving end of that. Or I think for a lot of organizations, deeply connected to the artists that are making the work, because sometimes I know I talk so much about the impact on the community that we have to really make sure that we're also centering the impact on the artists. We can't have this vibrant and emotionally impactful and compelling sector without the artists that make the art, that make us feel things. So the impact on the artists is really important. Another great characteristic of the strongest and most resilient organizations, one is transparency, right? At least to a large degree. You can't be transparent about everything, but if again, even if you just are transparent about what you're trying to accomplish, that will help you build your relationships within the community, right? People get excited about what you want to achieve and they want to help you achieve those things. The other thing that I think a strong organization does, ask itself a lot of questions about what could happen. You want to prepare for a lot of different possibilities, right? And that can mean that your 6 months of operating savings so that in case a crisis comes, you have a cushion to weather it. It can mean that you're asking yourself, okay, if this, these are just good thought exercises, right? If this funding magically goes away, what happens to us? If this board member has to step off, if we're super reliant on this one board member to accomplish whatever that is, right? What happens if they suddenly have a crisis of their own and they can't participate in the same way? Or you're one staff member that's the one that like everything revolves around, right? All of those questions, or even I know that like you are so technology focused, right? We can ask ourselves, like, what happens if the technology changes and it affects our ability to do business, right? We go back to these tools of analyzing or breaking down the what ifs in our sphere of influence, right? What if something changes? You want to think about all of those possibilities because a lot of the time they have the same answer, right? Is it simply a cash cushion? Is it broadening your donor base or your board? Is it having backups for things or just being able to say, okay, if we have to take a pause, these are the things that happen. I think when we started the pandemic, I mean, I'm at a point where I'm like, we can see so many patterns, and also we're so far out in them that we're starting to see new patterns, and we're also so far out in them that we can see a lot of the retrospective with clarity, right? But what we saw is that a lot of people didn't have a plan or a possibility for what would happen. This huge decision in 5 seconds, right? That affects the entire future of our organization. And there were not that many options for those outcomes, right? People laid off staff or they closed facilities or they just straight up paused operations, right? But you have to know where you can be flexible, where you have more or just less flexibility, right? If you have a space, you have a lease, then you are contractually obligated to pay a certain amount until the end of that lease. So how does that affect your flexibility in other areas? I think the strongest organizations ask themselves those questions about what if on a regular basis, can see some of the possibilities that they may have to be prepared for to be resilient.
That's so helpful. And I thought we could play a little bit of a game here. You have so much experience reviewing hundreds of grant applications. So I thought we could do a look behind the screen of No Box Dance. And I'm curious, what do you think No Box Dance is doing right when it comes to programming and community building? And where can we continue to improve?
Cool. So I think that what is so special about No Box is that there is a laser focused clarity of the type of experience that you're creating, the type of work that you're working with, the kind of goal of we're here to show you what could be. And I think that's really exciting. You're in a great position. It's an interesting thing to see in all these grant applications that often a smaller organization that has really clear focus can notably stand out because it is a crystal clear story to tell, right? And so that is a huge benefit that you guys have right now. I think where there's maybe opportunities is not necessarily things that like you haven't done or you aren't doing, right? But I think that you have opportunities with adjacent kind of technology interested people that are not necessarily arts interested, but they could come to it because, wow, I never thought that VR could be used that way. Like they'll want to know about the science behind the machine learning models that you use or behind they'll want to know about it from a different perspective than the arts lovers will see it from. And then you have an opportunity to actually bring new people in. You have an opportunity to get this arts content out in a different sphere. I feel the arts stay in our own little spaces, right? Like we talk to arts people and we go to arts conferences and we do these things and they're arts focused, right? Because you want to be with your people, which is amazing and valuable and so critical for all of us. But like, I would love to see, especially for an organization like No Box, I think there's an opportunity to go into tech spaces and blow their minds a little bit about how some of these things are getting applied.
Thanks, Anne, for letting me put you on the spot there. I think it's just really helpful to share with our listeners how somebody in your position is looking and thinking about different organizations. So I thought our organization could be a perfect example of what you're seeing is working well and areas that we can certainly develop and create more relationships.
Yeah, it's fun. There's always opportunity, right? And even just reframing, I feel like we've had a movement lately towards reframing, challenges as opportunities. And it does change how we think about it when we're asking questions like that. So fun to talk about.
Do you find that there are any emerging trends in community engagement that you think are especially promising or challenging?
So I think that we are in many ways in a transitional moment, right? Where we're still transitioning, I think, into a space where community engagement starts from that place of inquiry, right? And not starts from the traditional place of, okay, community engagement is doing in school performances and it is doing this like a certain specific way, following a path that's already been set out as community engagement. And so I think that the stronger work that I see really does start from what do people need? What do they want? What do they say they need? What are the patterns? Because I think there's a difference between, yeah, this was a great concert or this was a this was good. But if people never see what's possible, what like the highest level of something could be, then how do they know what possibilities could come from it, right? Like, how do they know what they even want? 'Cause sometimes there is a difference between, and this was something I had to really wrap my head around too, because I think in many ways, like, I see things as good and bad, not necessarily the highest quality or the lowest quality or whatever it is, right? There's something really valuable in almost everything and almost every performer or artist or whatever it is, like there's something really important. And it's identifying what that is so that you can tell people this is the highest quality version of it, or this is the thing that's going to blow your mind because you've never experienced it. And sometimes getting people a little prepped like that can really help set the stage for them to come in and go, what kind of experience am I going to have? Showing people the possibilities, but also that shift from these are the traditional things that we do to what can we be shown that is an option that we never would have thought of if we hadn't asked these questions? Because even I think a lot about education programming. Education programming in schools is critical. It's necessary. It's relevant. It's incredibly impactful. And it might not be the right thing for all people, right? For all organizations or for all artists. Sometimes the right type of education programming could be adult education. Sometimes it could be going into senior centers and doing programming there. It could be working with the university on their extended courses that are open to anybody, right? There can be a whole world of possibilities based on what is actually happening in that community. For example, I was talking to an arts organization in a community outside of Texas that was saying education is not important for us because we have almost no school kids in this community. We're a retirement community. And I was like, oh, but that means you have an opportunity, right? Because I know, just as my small sample size example, my parents are retired and they call me up all the time and tell me about the classes that they're taking, or they go to the talks at the Performing Arts Center. They go to those things because they have the time. They're offered options during the day or on a different type of schedule. So there's opportunities if you start to look at things in a little bit of a different perspective, right? And not just we have to check the boxes of this traditional version of what this is.
You're listening to Dance Behind the Screen podcast. Let's explore the future of dance together. And what do you think defines a high quality arts experience?
I got myself into that question, didn't I?
It's okay. It can be your personal bias, or maybe you can talk about an experience that you feel like is high quality and they're checking those boxes that make you feel part of something and you leave with that like memory.
Yeah. I have had a massive range of high quality experiences throughout my life. Like I can look back at experiences I had as a kid that I remember in very great detail. My mom took me to an indie panpipe band performance at the Field Museum in Chicago when I was like 7, and I bought the tape because that's what they were selling. And I listened to this tape for years. I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever experienced. 7-year-old getting really into ambient panpipe music.
You're going to end up in the arts someday,
Right.
somehow.
Yeah, I'm going to study ethnomusicology one day, right? I remember also when I have a degree in oboe performance, and I got into the oboe, number one, because nobody else did it at my school. And so it was like, I can be different. But right after I started, I didn't really know what it meant to be good at the oboe. My mom did a lot of stuff with my mom. Both my parents, we did a lot of arts growing up. But I remember it was just my mom and I at this concert, and we went to see the principal oboist of the Chicago Symphony, Alex Klein at the time, perform like the Mozart concerto, which is the kind of everybody starts with the Mozart oboe concerto. It's everybody has to learn it if you're an oboe player. And I was like a month or two into playing this instrument, and I was honking away like a duck, and I had no idea. And he started playing this piece. We saw him do a solo. And I remember my mom and I just turned to each other one note in with our jaws on the floor, right? Because we didn't realize what it could be. So I'd had already like this experience with music where I had been to symphony concerts. I had been playing the flute for years. I had been involved in it. I had a level of familiarity already, but I didn't know how good it could get. And so there's that type of high quality experience. I think there's also a high quality experience that comes from curiosity and developing and building curiosity in people, right? Where they can experience something new or experience something they've never encountered before, right? So I think that quality can come in many forms, right? It is either the best of something or the most unexpected, or like you're walking into that space where you feel welcomed and oh my God, I never knew this could be here either. Because so I'm also an old school Deadhead, and I was watching the Amazon documentary about the Grateful Dead last night, and they were talking about, oh, it's this space that a bunch of people who never felt like they had a space could be in collectively. And that's a high quality experience, because like we all need to find those places. And I think that the arts can create those opportunities like almost nothing else can. So the high quality experience can take so many different forms.
I love that.
What was interesting is like you had me really thinking about technology actually coming in versus what we ended up talking about. So I don't know if there's anything else that you want to get into around the things that we've done together too, or like strategic planning or I'm good wherever you want to, wherever.
I certainly would love to talk more about how you're thinking about technology in terms of programming, and what in other arts organizations that they're doing right in terms of utilizing technology to enhance and not replace the art form.
Yeah. So what I think is really interesting with technology and the art itself is that there is so much going on that most of us have no understanding about, right? So we may not actually know the difference between the kind of visual arts or like the video components that we often see brought in, right? I wouldn't necessarily know the difference, but I know that there are artists who are doing different things, but they all, from my perspective, I see as an audience member, I see a visualization. I see these kinds of transformative things. I don't necessarily know when somebody is using machine learning or they're using a different kind of software or whatever those approaches are. So I think we are in a place where I personally need some education on the actual art itself that is happening, right? Because I see the end results of stuff and I'm just like, whoa, I don't understand how that happened. That's super cool. I would love to know what the differences were between your approach versus somebody like Tommy's approach that we worked with last year. What are those different things, or even between all of the visual artists that tend to get brought into work with some of the performing groups? I don't know the differences between their approaches. Some way of helping bring us into what the technology is adding or contributing in that way.
It's interesting you say that, because I feel like a lot of conversations we have about dance on this podcast are that sometimes going to dance performances, it can feel like this special club. And if you don't know the language, you're sitting there, what am I watching? Like, I don't understand. And you can feel really left out or stupid and not included. So it's interesting to hear you talk about technology in a similar way, that there's these two different fields, both apparently of which No Box is exploring, that can definitely feel like these secret clubs where you don't really understand what's going on. What are you supposed to be watching? What are you supposed to be getting from this? And I think what we've identified is what's so important is this aspect of storytelling. And this doesn't have to be, it could be an abstract story for someone to follow along and feel like they're a part of the experience. But I'm curious, in your experiences, what do you think has made a good storytelling experience, whether it be with dance or with technology or both?
That's a great question too, because I think it's so hard to know what the right story is for the audience. I once had not an argument, but I had a discussion with a friend and colleague because I was like in the weeds about something and their storytelling. I was like, how come you're not talking about the weeds, right? The weeds are what makes you different and important. And he was just like, you have to remember, nobody knows the weeds. Like they see a field, right? Like they're not looking that deep. And so they need to know, are we a corn field or a soybean field? And they don't need to know which variety of corn because they literally can't relate that far yet. I spend so much of my time in the weeds and in the subtle differences between things. So for me, like wanting to know, okay, what is the difference between like your version of this versus somebody else's version? I know that for most people, the storytelling has to come at a higher level because that's the entry point, right? They need something that helps them understand, like, okay, what even is the difference between modern dance and I don't even know, jazz? I'm even thinking about styles in a school for kids, right? Like a dance school. I've been to the adult classes and I look at the brochures and I'm like, I literally do not know the difference between what I'm about to do, but I know that it's a Tuesday at 7 and I'm going to show up, right? And so, like, some of those, we have to remember where people need their starting points and how you build a journey for them. That, okay, you start with this one and then you can get a little bit deeper. And then all of a sudden, you're reading all the books and you're at all of the shows and you know exactly which style you prefer and which artist you prefer and why. And so then they start to tell their own stories about it. I'm a learner, so I love learning about that stuff and kind of learning what the details are and how I can be in the weeds on anything. I think the other great thing with storytelling is, again, so much of this is coming back to asking people things, right? I don't think enough arts groups ask what is working in terms of storytelling for people. So I recommend to a lot of people, look in your database, look in your patron list, and look at who's come 2 times or 3 times or whatever it is, even if it's over a couple of years, and call them and ask them why they come back. And if you do those things, you start to see not just the story that you've been putting out, but you start to see how it's actually landing, what kind of stories they're creating around the work as well. Art is amazing in that we can have all the best intentions to communicate a specific story, and people are still often going to take away their own version of it. It can be really educational to see how things are landing versus our marketing materials that we put out that we hope people are resonating with, because there might be something totally different that is really resonating. That's an opportunity again for the artist or as an organization to capitalize on it and adjust your own storytelling.
I love that. And I have to say, you helped us really identify what the field is for No Box and kind of get us out of the weeds. As a small working team, we're in the weeds, whether we try to look at the field or not, but that's just where it's at. Even when we try our hardest to zoom out, it doesn't matter. We can still fill all those gaps in our mind. A part of what we've really loved about the Taka Arts Accelerator program is having people like you review our materials and point out what's missing. And one of the things that you really helped us with was doing that with our tagline. Our tagline has always been say no to the box. But what you did is you really helped us look at our tagline and see how can that better align with our mission. And so our new tagline is say no to the box and yes to the future of dance. And so thank you for that, first off. So now you have public credit. I'm curious, how do you think No Box Dance is doing that? Saying no to the box and yes to the future of dance?
Yeah. That was such a fun conversation. And I will say, I am not normally good at things like taglines or names, but it was really just synthesizing all of the great things that you guys were already saying. So I'm excited that worked out so well for everybody. I think that what you guys do well, again, like this idea of showing people the possibilities, right? I think that idea generation is actually really hard. It's really hard for me. And I think that seeing future possibilities is super challenging. Like it can be scary. It can be difficult. Like it can be very hard for a lot of people to ask themselves what could be with something. And I think you guys, especially, I really loved this last festival with the kind of combination of things that you were able to show off. I have talked about that VR experience so much because I just had no idea what it was going to be like. When I've done other VR experiences before, it was never as vivid and interesting and engaging. And this was a whole different version of that. So it was so cool. I also think that one of the things that you guys do so beautifully is bringing together all of these different voices around the world, right? Being able to really capitalize on the format that makes that an option in such a cohesive way, right? I remember several films that really live in my head. Like the one with the woman who was dancing in the water with the humpback whales. There was one about one of, I think she was maybe Jordania, I don't remember, Middle Eastern woman that was like a really incredible poetry that was being delivered at the same time as the dance. There are pieces that really stick with me because they thought about possibilities, right? They thought about things from such a different perspective than I could ever have them. Watch them in a room with my friends or on my couch, going into the space and playing with the cameras and seeing how it was being manipulated. It was a chance to really be in the space in a different way than you normally get to be when you're at a traditional kind of performance. We don't get a chance to see some of this stuff or to experience it. To me, these are things that don't have a high barrier to access perception wise. Anybody can watch those films on YouTube, right? But it's about getting to the right things with that kind of filter of these are the ones that we think really need to be out there. Like these are the ones that have that kind of impact. And I think what's really fun with any sort of festival, any sort of arts organization can bring your audiences along with you on a path of curiosity, right? Like the best work that I've ever been a part of did that. The artists were not always well known, but hundreds of thousands of people would come out because they knew that they were going to have a certain type of experience or that everything was going to be fun and different. And maybe they would recognize things and maybe they would find something new and they would have that mix. And I think that you guys do very much the same thing of like, you have this culture of curiosity of what could be the kind of expectation that delivers, right? Like people come in knowing that what they're going to experience is going to be different, interesting, beautiful, make you think, challenging sometimes, right? And you don't necessarily have to know what it is to know that you're going to walk in and have those experiences. So I think it's really great.
Thanks, Anne, for identifying that for us. It's very helpful, especially as we continue to evolve and grow. And it's not often there's somebody who's so familiar with our organization, with your area of expertise. How do you feel like you personally say no to the box and yes to the future?
Oh, I ask a lot of questions, and which has also been a theme of this conversation. um, Again, it's really funny. We just did, as a team, we just did an exercise of working genius. So kind of identifying our personal ways that we tend to approach a situation or approach work that give us not just that you do them well, but they're the things that really fill you up. And one of mine was this area called wonder. And so like I spend a lot of time thinking about what could be or asking like what might happen if or what happens when XYZ happen, what should we be prepared for? Again, these are things that I've brought up other points in this conversation, but like those are the things where I think that's how I look forward, right? That's how I look into the future and say, okay, sometimes we need a box and that's really important. And sometimes we don't. And sometimes the most creativity comes from a box, right? The most innovation comes from a box. Really think about the fact that most things don't nothing really explodes out of nowhere, right? Like it is a combination of the constraints that are placed around us, our own ability to think outside the box. Like you say, the first part of thinking outside the box is identifying the box you're in too. So you have this symbiotic relationship of, I know that this is not going to be the thing that is forever, and whatever is coming next, I just have to imagine what it could be. And I think with art, that's one of the great things that it helps us do. It helps us think about how we can imagine, think about how we can be creative. Ask a lot of questions. That's my way.
Flash 4.
And we have our last segment, which is called our Flash 4, where we ask all our guests to answer 4 questions in a flash. Are you ready?
Sure.
If you had to recommend a resource to our audience, what would it be?
A friend sent me a book recently, a colleague that I had not seen in years and I ran into, and it was done by the National Center for Choreography in Akron. I have been meaning to connect you with this group because they put out a book that's all artists speaking about creative administration. It's such a cool collection of essays. I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly the name of the book right now, which is crazy because I literally just wrote it down yesterday for the new Arts Accelerator cohort. But it's
Link it in the show notes.
I'll make sure that you have it because it's really cool. It's individual essays, but everyone kind of closes with some calls to action of what do you do about this topic. There are names that you have actually told me about in that book. There's people that I have known before, but it's been really cool to go through that. So that's been one of my things lately. I've been reading this book that my colleagues sent.
Great. What was the first dance you saw?
I had the benefit of seeing a lot of stuff, being exposed to a lot growing up in Chicago in a school district that had a lot of field trips to see things. If I'm being real, the first dance I probably saw was the Nutcracker on TV. My dad recorded on a VHS cassette and I probably played 1,000,000 times. It was great because it was a story and it was special, it was beautiful and it was great music and it was so fun. And yeah, it was probably the first that I saw.
Do you think social media has a positive influence on the dance world, yes or no?
Yes.
What's your favorite social media platform?
I am actually a Reddit user.
That shocks me.
It shocks me too sometimes. But I like the conversational aspect of it. And I like, even though there's like a bunch of made up stories on there, it's fun. It's a combination of social media and internet research, and you can see the strangest things. And also the algorithm knows me better than any of the other platforms now. So
I love that. I actually heard somewhere recently that ChatGPT is a lot of the information is pulled from Reddit.
And there's a lot of Reddit posts that are straight up AI generated.
So it's like the AI fueling the AI.
It's so wild. It's fascinating to watch. But yeah, it's the last one I ever expected to be an avid user of, but like I'm on it every day.
Oh my gosh. That's so funny. Anne, thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights, and thank you for the support and mentorship of No Box Dance. How can our listeners stay connected with you and the work that you're doing?
It has been a real pleasure to get to know you guys better and get to participate in it as an end user as well. So I'm happy that we have gotten to know each other so well and to have a chance to talk to you. For all that I say about social media and the internet, I'm not super present. The work at Taka is available through our website, through our newsletter, through our social media accounts. That's probably the most prominent way that my work is out there. And then I'm on LinkedIn. So, I have if you look for Anne Kogan, there's not a lot of us in the arts. So it should be pretty easy. I think I'm just like the LinkedIn/IN/@Anne Kogan. So pretty easy to find me.
Great. Thank you again, Anne, for coming on our show. And to our listeners, as always, keep dancing behind the screen. Until next time. Thanks for tuning in to Dance Behind the Screen podcast. Keep dancing, keep innovating. See you next time.
Thanks for taking your time to tune in to Dance Behind the Screen, a bi-monthly interview series where we go behind the screen to question process, product, and social media. Be sure to follow us on social media @KNOW Box Dance. See you next time, and don't forget to say no to the box.